All right, it's recording. Who wants to go first, Alex or Patrick?
Patrick, do you want to go first?
Go for it.
You will do it alphabetically.
Okay. Okay, still with the last names. So my name is Alex Muston. I'm with the OHTN. I'm the senior lead of testing and clinical initiatives there, and I've been working with Patrick O'Byrne on the GetaKit project, and very excited to be here tonight to talk to you guys about it.
So I am Patrick O'Byrne. I'm a professor of nursing at the University of Ottawa. I'm also a nurse practitioner and I practice in the STI clinic in Ottawa. And also was one of the founding clinicians who set up the Gay Zone Clinic in Ottawa that we've been operating since 2007 or 8 now.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Patrick and Alex, for introducing yourselves. Now, the floor is yours to get going with this.
Oh, I should have tried this before. It does say that it's disabled the screen sharing.
Oh, let me see here. Try now.
Yes, perfect. So I heard compliments for the graphics, and I'm excited that you guys like them because our PowerPoint deck is filled with them. So really excited to share this with you guys. As we said, I'm Alex and co-presenting with Patrick O'Byrne. And I'm not able to forward. And he's going to start with the first couple of slides.
I'm just going to move my face is presently, there we go, blocking everything. All right, so just starting with, some stuff that most people are already familiar with, the background, why were we doing this, where did we sort of come up with the idea? We've had long-standing initiatives, local in different regions across Ontario, in Ontario generally across Canada. You can go to primary care, your family physician, your nurse practitioner, you can go to the emergency room, there's public health clinics, there's anonymous testing sites, and notwithstanding basically all of these different opportunities for testing that really are free. In many cases, their barriers eliminated by not requiring health cards. We're still sitting with around 14% of people who are living with HIV or undiagnosed and therefore unaware of their HIV status. So really what we look at is, is self-testing something else that we can add in? Then the people, again, despite all of our efforts, we have ongoing transmission. So basically most of the new infections that we're seeing in ongoing diagnosed infections continue to be among the same groups, which have been labeled the priority populations for HIV. So these are gay, bisexual, other men who have sex with men, members of African, Caribbean, and Black communities, members of Indigenous communities, people who use drugs, and persons who are trans. So basically, we still have, despite everything, a bunch of people who are unaware of their HIV status, and many of our new infections continue to be in the same sort of populations, those priority populations listed there. So just sort of as a background, with all this, a good reminder for everyone, just as we go through our messaging, and sometimes just a good reminder for us ourselves personally, is when do we actually test? And there's a few different options. Anyone with symptoms, so seroconversion symptoms, symptoms of untreated sort of a chronic longer term HIV infection should be tested. So rashes, fevers, chills, fatigue, unexplained abdominal pain, unusual sort of blood work, if you're doing with a family doctor, for example. Anyone with symptoms, it's just always a good idea to have HIV ruled out. And I think this is something that we forget. We focus a lot always on the priority populations, but we forget that sometimes the longer standing, undiagnosed infections, sometimes are amongst people who don't belong to that. So it's just always, if you have symptoms, do it. If you're in a priority group and you definitely have symptoms, definitely as part of just sort of the workup, you get a rash, considering an HIV test is important. Most rashes aren't caused by HIV, but we do see a lot of people who have HIV would present with a rash. They do have swollen lymph nodes, they do have fatigue, flu-like symptoms. They feel kind of like they have mono, So it's always a good idea. Same thing is if the person you're having sex with, or you're sharing drug equipment with, or you're using drug equipment with, if they have those types of symptoms, it's always a good idea to go and do the testing. If you have directly had contact, whether through sexual contact or through sharing of drug equipment with somebody who is diagnosed with HIV, Absolutely. HIV testing and seeking out other interventions like post-exposure prophylaxis, PEP, are important. New sexual partners also, right? It's just a new risk factor that you have. And if you or your partner has, right, just sort of multiple partners, defined as more than one, right, go and actually just do some routine testing. So how to test? There used to be really only 2 ways to test, and now there's 3, but there are effectively 2 modalities to do it. The first is the traditional laboratory test. You go to a clinical setting, they give you a requisition, and they draw blood. They stick a needle into your arm, they take some blood out, they send it to a lab. And basically what the lab does is it runs a test. And that test, if it shows a positive result, they run a subsequent test. They run a couple others to actually see if it's confirmed. You can always have a chance of a false positive on the screening test. It's very slim, but it is possible. So the lab, before it actually releases the result back to whoever did the test for you, they will have all of the tests run. If the first one's negative, it doesn't need to be redone. If the first one's positive, then they just have to confirm. Basically, the way it works is like a net thrown into the sea. They throw in a big thing, you pull it out. There's a whole lot of fish in there, but every so often you get like a Coke can and a plastic bottle. So for the test itself, the net was cast large enough to make sure that it did pick up every single fish that it could have gotten. But the consequence of that broad net is occasionally it brings in a couple other things, right? Such as that Coke can and piece of plastic that you then, as the fisherman, fish through and you say, no, that's not an actual fish. So that's sort of what the confirmatory testing does. The point of care test is equivalent to that first screen, and it's one that you can do instead of having to go and have blood taken and sent off to the lab. You can do it right there in the clinical setting. And it literally is just you do a test at the point that you are receiving care, right? In the clinical or outreach setting. You do a test. This is the bioelectrical insti test. You poke your finger. Many of us are familiar with that. You pour in some vials and you get a result. And it takes sort of 1 to 5 minutes to do the entire process. This test is the equivalent of the screen that I talked about in the lab test. So what has to occur is if you have a positive or a reactive or preliminary positive, whatever language we want to use, if that point of care test shows, yes, we think it's a positive result, you then need to have blood drawn to actually do the confirmatory, because again, the point of care will function to basically say it's not going to miss infections, right? It's going to find 999 out of 1,000 positive results. So it's exceptionally good, but it will include in some, it's going to basically say a couple times it's positive when it's not an actual positive result. So this is where we need to do the actual blood test, right? The laboratory test to remove those. The self-test is exactly the same basically as the point of care. The difference being that it's the point of care test that you can do at home. This was approved on November 2nd in Canada. These have been used around the world for much longer than that, but we now have it as of November. You can actually go on and order them from the website, from the manufacturer. They're a bit expensive. I think taxes included. They cost around $40 for the actual test kit, which, I mean, just going back to some of the priority populations, HIV more or less is an infection of socioeconomic status, of power differentials, of vulnerability, of minority status. And so this $40 threshold, right, the cost that comes into it will inherently be a barrier to some of the people we want to get easy, accessible, impediment-free testing to. So self-testing is available. It's there. It's effectively the same. You do the same. It's still the Insti kit. Those of you who have done it, you just don't have the alcohol swab. You rub on your finger, you just wash your hands with soap and water. And instead of having that like little white pipette thing that if you've had this done on yourself, right, where the person is milking it and really trying to get the blood into that little plastic dropper up to a certain line. In this one, you just sort of squish it and you let it fall into it. But they are effectively the same test. That being said, it also means that if you do have a positive, reactive, preliminary positive, again, whatever we want to call it, result on the self-test, it should be confirmed right with the first one, the laboratory test, that we go back to actually confirm, yes, this is what they call a true positive. It's an actual positive result, and it is not generating a false positive result for some other reason. So when to test? The newer guidelines that are coming for Ontario are changing. We used to really focus on you have to do the testing at 12 weeks, making sure you're outside the window period. With the advancements of the tests, the new sort of thinking is this 3-6-3. So you do a test 3 weeks after potential exposure, then you repeat at 6 weeks, and then you do a final one at 3 months, which would be the 12 weeks. The 3 weeks, you could do this as the blood draw or with the point of care. The blood draw is just a more sensitive test, meaning that it actually picks up more infections and could do so earlier in an infection. The blood test, for example, can detect what's called a P24 antigen, which is actually a little piece of protein that's stuck on the outside of the HIV virus capsule itself, meaning that whereas we've traditionally done just antibody tests, which is we're looking for the thing your body builds to actually fight a virus, the newer test that's done in the lab actually has the ability to pick up a little piece that's on the outside of the HIV virus to say if it's actually there. That will reduce when you can do testing. When you're doing that test at 6 weeks, it's exceptionally accurate. Which is why they say repeat at 6 weeks, and then 3 months you can basically rule out infection, meaning that if you had a sexual contact or you shared drug equipment and then 3 months later you repeated the test and it was negative at that point, we'd be pretty confident in most people that we could say, but you do not have HIV. There's only a few situations where that would be sort of not the case, and it really comes down to immunologic issues. So if a person has some very profound immune disorder, autoimmune disorder, typically, it can actually interfere with it, basically due to the fact that if your immune system is impaired, your immune system won't build the antibodies as quickly as it would have had you not had this impediment. And so consequently, it can be a little bit longer. But in almost everyone, we can follow this 3-6-3 and then be confident. So that's that window period word there, which can really vary between 2 weeks and 3 months, varies from person, varies from the type of test, but it's really from how long does it take for a test to show, right, the presence of HIV, and then help us confidently rule it out between an exposure and when we actually do the test. The new guidance we're going forward is just to remember the 3-6-3. The takeaway from 3-6-3 is if somebody presents to a clinical setting or to an outreach setting or to sort of your peer-based setting or wherever it happens to be, and they say they want testing, that what we want to change our thinking from is don't deter somebody from testing until it's been 12 weeks. Test them at the point that they present, and then ensure that you do the subsequent tests. Some people will follow the 3-6-3. I think from my experience, the vast majority will not. They're going to right now stick exactly to that regimen, but then you're at least getting more testing in. What you don't want to do, and I've seen this quite a bit, is somebody will show up, they're not in the window period, we do the test. Sometimes we do find, right, whether this is a brand new acute seroconversion, like it's a brand new very early infection, or it's an older infection that a person didn't know they have, we're able to at least identify that in the person, right, inform them of them, connect them to care and any resources, support services that they need, instead of just saying, come back in 12 weeks, which may or may not actually occur. So it's, again, test, retest is kind of the takeaway and what that distills down to.
So who is GetaKit? We talked about self-testing as being a risk in addition as options for testing. The core group is Patrick at the University of Ottawa as lead, and then we partnered with Ottawa Public Health, members from the AIDS Committee of Ottawa and Max Ottawa. And it's a project that's funded by the OHTN, and we're offering some coordination support as well. So more about what GetaKit is. It launched in July 2020 in Ottawa to pilot mail-out delivery of free HIV self-tests in the region. And it's since been expanded, or is in the process of expanding, to 6 sites in Ontario. And wherever it is, we kind of want to know essentially the same thing. How many people are using it, who is using it, and what are the test results? And are those people being linked to care? This is with a particular emphasis on status neutral linkage. So whether somebody has a reactive or non-reactive result or a negative or positive result, we want to make sure that people are in touch and helping them with next steps. what's in your kit. I think Kiro, I won't spoil too much of it because I think Kiro wants to have the pleasure of unboxing, which I'm very excited to see. But just briefly, we really wanted to package the HIV self-test in something that would sort of showcase the region's pathways, supports, and like existing work. Like self-testing, which I've said in other presentations as well, is not meant to be standalone. It's not meant to be an extra piece. It's a part of another tool in your toolkit. And so we wanted to put it in something that would help users organize some of the components. So we asked our partners at ArcandCo to come up with a workstation to help organize the kit, which I think is one of the nicest features of the box. And then it also contains specific linkage information about the area, which is also reflected in what's up on the website as well. There's even a pocket, and Kiro, when you open it, we'll see it all kind of come out. There's a pocket for HIV prevention materials to be inserted as well. So this is everything. I should have taken this slide out now that I think of it, but this is everything sort of laid out in an aerial bird's eye view, which I think will be helpful. But basically what happens is it opens up like a book, and it sort of it has like a moderately large footprint, but I think it's just really to encourage you to make sure that there's space for you to be able to take the tests. There's no distractions. It's just something that you're doing and focused on. I think I hand it back over to you, Patrick. Or am I doing these ones? Sorry.
That was yours.
Okay. So essentially the flow of the GetaKit program is that you register online and then you order your test. You can have it mailed to your house and then you get it, use it, and get your results. It's pretty straightforward. We've kept it streamlined without any other bells and whistles. It's about getting your test and using it. So this is a screenshot of the website. Again, it's pretty front and center, the button for just ordering your kit, and then you can also report your result. And there's a couple of other pieces about resources in the menu. And then just before registering for the account, you have to fill out an eligibility form as well. So right now, previously when it first launched, eligibility was 18, and we've since lowered it to 16 years of age. And then with a valid mobile number, so you needed to validate with an SMS text, sort of the way you do on most websites these days. And you also need, or you can use a validated email address plus a landline. It used to be that you had to be an Ottawa resident, but it's since expanded to be Ontario. You have an HIV negative status or unknown. You're not currently taking PrEP. You're not enrolled in an HIV vaccine trial, and you don't have any known bleeding disorders. Patrick can elaborate on some of those pieces too if there's questions. So there is a baseline or intake questionnaire when you're first, I guess it's more like a self-assessment when you're first coming onto the website. And some of it is just to be able to gather information, especially for our evaluation, to see who are the people who are using the kit. Can we make any adjustments to make sure that we're appealing to more priority populations? Sorry. And then other risk practices also just sort of help with the status neutral linkage to care.
So this is back to me. So from the sort of questionnaire, the self-assessment that we do, the rationale for the self-assessment is getting back to the question of if we're going to be offering online delivered free access to HIV self-testing, what we really want to know is, are the people who are using it, are they members of the HIV priority populations, and what are the outcomes, right? Are we able to actually identify new diagnoses? If we do that, are we able to link those people with care, with support services? And whenever I say care, it's not just medical care, giving people pills and achieving undetectable viral loads, but it's ensuring that people have the support systems, counseling, whatever peer-based services they require. And again, is this if we're not getting positive results, or at least we getting testing within the groups that are most affected by HIV, again, our priority groups. So from the eligibility criteria, we had, I think this was as of that was of the 19th, actually. I pulled these numbers on the 19th because that wraps up sort of the first 7 months that we've been running it. We had around 1,200 people. I think it was 1,100 and high number or something. So around 1,200 people who'd actually gone onto the website to determine if they could get a kit. Around half were eligible. So I think it's on the next slide, but sort of people were screened out mostly based on geography, then second based on prep, and subsequently based on age. So the modifications we've made, again, expanding geography, decreasing age, and then sort of modifying the ability to validate from just an SMS through a phone to actually an email. What we found though is that once people actually got through the eligibility, around 75%, so 3/4 continued to actually register. So put in their information and create an account to actually continue. And then from there, we had basically the people who registered, they completed the survey and ordered a kit. So really we had our drop off from the major drop off was people would log on, they go through the eligibility criteria and be booted out at that point. Then from there, and this is the actual driven by people who are logging on, around 1 in 4 they were eligible but decided they didn't want to proceed. But those who were sort of committed at that point continued through the process, and that's where you get up to the 100%. Next slide, Alex. So the reasons for the ineligibility, which I just briefly touched on, you can see 15% of people resided outside of Ottawa, 10% were on PrEP, 8% didn't have a cell phone, 5% bleeding disorder, and then lastly, I can't see that, actually 3% not old enough. So the on PrEP, why is this an exclusion criterion? It's really due to the fact that if you're on PrEP, the clinical guidelines in Canada say you should be doing HIV testing every 3 months. All of the HIV testing guidelines also say basically the max frequency that we do HIV testing for everybody is every 3 months. So if you're on PrEP and you're doing testing every 3 months as is clinically indicated, you don't really need subsequent and additional HIV testing done. You're doing it at the frequency that we think is needed. The cell phone, this becomes a little bit of a barrier, and that's why we expanded to the email plus the landline. This we know is going to continue to be a slight barrier. The rationale of the implementation phases to this is we want to make sure that if somebody reports a positive result to us, that we're able to connect with them instead of the person being in isolation. So it's the person reports it back to us, we're going to be able to actually reach out to them on a daily basis and say, you reported a positive or reactive result onto the site, back to the site for us, and we'd like to follow up with you, basically doing an assessment over the phone to say, what is it that you need and how can we help you? How can we get you connected to care? How can we get you to do confirmatory testing? What are the next things that you need now that you've reported this to us? The bleeding disorder is due to the fact that the self-test, you're going to bleed, and if you have an uncontrolled bleeding disorder, it might not be the best for you to then be stabbing yourself with a lancet at home. And then the age, the 3%, this is again why we have decreased it. But just addressing the cell phone, addressing the age, and addressing the outside Ottawa, we're coming up there of around an additional 25%. So a quarter of those who are ineligible would become eligible just through this actual screening process. So who's using it? This is, again, the rationale for us doing the self-assessment really comes down to say, who are the people who are doing it? It's not so that we can just have some database of knowing what's going on, and it's not just for research purposes, but it's to know if we're going to be targeting this, does it make good sense to continue an online system, right? Feeding this back basically to policymakers, feeding this back to local distributors, local sort of ASOs, saying, right, does this actually work? Who are you reaching? So of the, I wish I could actually remember the number. Oh no, I have it right here. I kept my scrap paper from the other day. So coming down to how many people did it, we had 400 and actually I need to find this on here. 412 people ordered 444 kits in the send-off. Of those 444, a quarter were first-time testers, meaning these were people who have reported through the self-assessment they had never done before in their lives an HIV test. We had another, I believe it's around 4% as well, who were uncertain if they had ever done HIV testing before. So putting together, it's somewhere around 70% were confident they had done an HIV test before. 30%, most of whom said they'd never tested before, and a small portion also had then said, I'm not sure if I'd ever tested before. So it's basically around 3 in 10 people reported either never testing or being uncertain if they'd ever done an HIV test before. Then going into what are the demographics, right, are people belonging to priority populations, we're actually coming up to around just over 70%, right? So just under 3/4 of people who actually logged on. Oh,
Sorry.
Just under 3/4 of the people who actually did the testing belong to priority populations. And by breakdown, that was 54% were gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men. 9% were members of African, Caribbean, and Black communities. 4% were members of Indigenous communities, and 2% identified as trans. Overall, putting aside any of the other risk factors, around 30% were women. So to give us a breakdown, over half were GBMSM, but we did have representation among the other priority populations as well. So positive results, none. So to date, nobody has actually reported a positive result to us. And that, what's the meaning of that? I'm not entirely certain. We have a reporting rate of just under 60%. I think when we adjust for the number of people who have kits in transit, I think it's actually 56% when all kits are counted. But at any given point, we have the orders that are pending and that are being shipped to people that are in transit that people have received but not yet tested yet. So we sit just under 60% of the results back. There's a subset in there, only around 4 or 5 people who, one of the reporting options is you can put in, I have a positive result, I have a negative result, I had an invalid test result, so it didn't work. You can also put in, I want to report a result, but I'm not telling you what it was. So there's sort of a, I don't want to tell you what it was, but they are going back on to actually log. And then there's the last group that just never went back to actually tell us what it was. So we have no positive results. There's a chance that the people who said, I don't want to tell you what it is, were positive. There's a chance that somebody, yeah, you can be multiple, Adrian, just to answer your question, you can be in multiple demographics. If you look by any single category, I think about half were white, half were gay. I think somewhere around 60% are men. So when you look at a lot of the individual metrics, it doesn't necessarily work. But when you put together to say who has at least one characteristic from a priority population, that's where we came to that 71%. Because if you are a Black, straight, cis man, you belong to a priority population, right? But that's going to say that a lot were cis, a lot were heterosexual. If you are a white, cis, gay man, again, right, it's going to say, look, a lot are white, a lot are cis, but then you have the person identifying as gay. So that's where we put in how many people had at least one, as opposed to what are the individual metrics that you're actually looking at. So for the positives, it could be that some people who reported negatives also had positives and just didn't want to report that and put something else. This is absolutely like potentially the case. The other thing that we have is the positivity rate for HIV testing. It sits around 0.08%. When you put that out to the number of tests, it means that most of the time we have to run somewhere around 1,200 to 1,300 tests to get a single positive. And this just comes from all of the testing that we do in Ontario. So we're not at that number of tests yet, right? We're actually only somewhere around 1/3 of the number where we would normally expect that we would find one positive through all HIV testing done in Ontario. So it could also be that we just haven't hit the minimum threshold, right, of tests. We haven't gotten enough tests out yet to actually identify positives. It could be, though, that some people have done it, and that's the group who won't report the result. It may be that that's the group who said, I won't tell you my result, or it could be some people just did and then reported back a negative result, right? It's unknown because this is all based on people reporting back to us. Nonetheless, officially reported onto the site, we have none. What we do have, though, is that if you are through the demographics, if we have any indication that you belong to an HIV priority population and you report a non-reactive or negative result back to us, what we do is we'll reach out to the person and actually offer them linkage to PrEP. And so we in Ottawa run through the STI clinic, a nurse-led PrEP clinic, with nurse practitioners and nurses. And so what we do is we actually bring people into that and say, we can get you in an appointment within a week. We have a few different time slots and providers who can do that, and we'll offer them an appointment, bring them in, and then get them initiated on PrEP if they're interested. So we have around 61%. That comes down to the difference between the 71 and the 61 is the missing reported test results, right? We wait for somebody to actually report a negative result back to us and be a member of a priority population. So you have sort of those two items crossing where we come just under 2/3 we've actually offered PrEP to. The interesting thing with that, despite having absolutely no positive HIV test results, is from our PrEP intake that we've identified a large number of STIs, rectal gonorrhea, chlamydia infections, infectious syphilis, right? So unsurprisingly, the infections that are just much more numerous. Like in Ottawa, we get of new HIV diagnoses. So this isn't the total number, but of new diagnoses, we probably get somewhere around 30 per year or so. That number might seem small, but that's taking out the immigration, those that were previously positive, right? That total number is larger, but of the new diagnoses. Whereas for infectious syphilis last year, we had something like 225, right? So it's just a much larger number. So we're going to encounter it more frequently. Chlamydia, we had something like 6,000. So it's not surprising that what this is doing at a bare minimum is working as a linkage to care for PrEP, right? So for other HIV prevention services, plus for more comprehensive just STBBI screening, right? And as part of PrEP as well, we'll give hepatitis A vaccination, hepatitis B vaccination, Gardasil, right? We just bring people into a service that is more comprehensive, knowing that around 25%, around 24%, so a quarter of people had never tested before. This becomes a new entry point into engagement in care, engagement in self-care that we can actually offer. So it's just more of that comprehensive wraparound system as opposed to just you do an HIV test and you move along. Few tips. All right, 2 things of interest. The first is that people aren't using enough blood. So you can see this little sort of image over on the side with the number 1 and the big drop. I don't care if you're actually going to be doing the test, but one time somebody did this at one point. They actually did it on line, and I was like, this is an interesting way to do it. But they were struggling, and it was interesting to see, right? You have to actually milk the finger, and you need to get a nice big drop of blood to come out. If you have done this test before or had somebody done it, have somebody do it to you, you know they're really pushing on your finger to milk and push some blood out to get into that pipette right before they move on to that. Like many of us have had experience with this. So what's happening when people who haven't or people who are doing it at home is they get a bit of blood and they think a little bit of blood is what I need. Well, what you actually really need is a nice big drop of blood. And so of the invalid results we've seen, and among those that we've been able to reach out to and get sort of connect with, the vast majority said, I don't think I used enough blood. And then we sort of counseled them on, you have to make sure your finger's warm, really make sure that drop of blood is sufficient in size, let it drop off your finger, not just sort of be scraped into the actual first vial. We sent kits to people who had invalid results again immediately, and all of those who reported subsequent results said, yeah, it worked this time, and all had negative results. The second thing is this word reactive caused some confusion at the outset, and I would say within the first few weeks we had somewhere 2, 3, or 4 people reported reactive results to us right off the bat. And so we saw this show up in the system. We reached out to the people and they said, yes, it was reactive. And then we clarified, well, what specifically, when you were looking in the test disk, what were you seeing? And I said, well, I was seeing 1 dot just under the C, so the control dot telling me it worked. And I said, did you see anything else in there? And I said, no, that was the only thing. And they said, well, we said to them, well, you have a negative test result. And they said, yeah, I know I have a negative test result, but I thought I was reporting that the test worked. So the interpretation of reactive was it reacted, right? I put my specimen in and the test did something. There was a reaction, right? The reaction was a negative result, but it reacted. And so this language that we have around reactive and non-reactive, right? It's familiar to us and we understand it, but that word has a dual meaning. Another one is that it worked, right? There was a reaction. Yes, there was a reaction. I got a dot, right? And then we followed up and all 4 of them were just like, well, I have a negative result. Why are you calling me? Another thing that came out of that though, is that people were expressing to us serious satisfaction saying, wow, there is actually a person who's there, and I reported this result, and within a few hours you were reaching out to me to see if I needed any support and care. And there was this acknowledgement of that happening, and these people we reached out to were thankful to say, well, I thought this was just sort of an online computer system, right? With the internet, you don't really know what's on the other side. But there is somebody there actually monitoring it. This is good. So if I did have a positive result, at least I'd be able to know that somebody's going to reach out. Is this you or me?
I can do it.
Okay.
So just to follow up a little bit more about the status neutral linkage to care, Patrick has described it in great detail, especially in what's been happening in Ottawa, which I think is fantastic. And I think the only pieces that we would love to share is that when we're doing the expansion to the 6 sites, we're going to be working with people at these sites to start talking about what their specific linkage to care is, so that everything is regionally specific. And so far, these have been really fantastic conversations for us, because I know that I'm learning a lot about what's been going on across the province in more detail than I've had before. And I think that's just going to really help underline what Patrick just finished saying, which is that there is going to be somebody on the other end of the website that's going to follow up, and it's probably going to be somebody that people are already familiar with because they've been engaged in services and programming before, and it's somebody who's going to know the area. So we're really excited about that part of the expansion, and we think that that's really going to strengthen. It's going to take a lot of the strengths that Ottawa has had with this very comprehensive sort of wraparound follow-up and linkage to care piece, and it's going to make that available to people in the province. So on that note as well, we just wanted to acknowledge all our partners and Porky down in the bottom, who's cuddling up with a GetaKit box right there. He's Instagram famous, I think now, Patrick? He's Patrick's cat.
He's world famous.
World famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't minimize his fame.
I'm so sorry. He brings a lot of joy in our GetaKit meetings, so I'm happy to share him with you guys as well. And that was it. Any questions?
So before we do any questions, let's open up a kit. So when you get it by mail, so when you get it by mail, you get it in this confidential, beautiful box over here. You have your address and everything on here. You're going to get it. It looks like this. Now, on each side, it's actually taped. So if this has been opened, it's or there's no tape on the side, I would actually be cautionary of that. But once you open it, you have the first flap on the inside over here. I really like it because it comes across as warm and something that's, it's not like bad news or something that to worry about. It comes with something like, hey, this is really cool, and it's something that I could trust and really take a look at and trust the process of how this is going to go. So your test kit is here. This opens up like this, and then here you have a did you know information. And so this is interesting now to try to show it that way. Here you go. So when you open it, it's going to look like this. And then here is the linkage. If you need to talk to someone, depending on your results or you want more information, it's on the inside over here. And over here, you have the actual testing kit that comes with the 3 bottles. I haven't opened this yet, but here you have the picture of what should be inside the box. And you open this like this. There's more information of how to, I'm trying to also see what I'm seeing here, like make sure that everyone sees everything. So you have this, and then here it tells you bottle 1, 2, and 3. You place them on here. The testing part where you put your blood on, the strip is here. So yeah. And then on the inside of the instructions, I just noticed that right now, there is more goodies in there. Oops. A lot of lube, the condoms, which is great. You get condoms here with them. And then, so there's information, a card on getting the tutorial, where to go to find that out. And the picture that that was shown yesterday and earlier in the presentation with the big drop of blood, it's here. Like it's really, it's, you know, the information is there, so someone shouldn't miss that. And you could give the card to someone for to make sure that, you know, if they want the information, you spoke to someone about it in person, then you can do it here. Here's the information so they don't forget it. And it comes in French and English. Then here you have the information on HIV. So everything that you need to know about HIV, about getting tested, a lot of the stuff that was given during the presentation is here, which is fantastic. And then getting started information. So this is all in there, and it's both French and English, which is great as well. So that's on there. I'm getting organized here. So when you get the box, it's sealed. Open it. More instructions. Follow the instructions. Take your time to read it. Take your time. There's no rush in doing the test. I haven't done it. I know I'm HIV positive, so I think the test for me would not be beneficial. But yeah, so I'm glad I got the sample kit though, so I could show everyone. So even there's, you know, pictures here explaining everything, how this works. Then, so there's a Band-Aid that comes in here. I know that the only thing that's not in there is an alcohol swab. So just like Patrick said earlier, wash your hands very well. Like really wash your hands because you don't want any infections. And these are the 3 small bottles. They're super, super tiny. So what's great about the testing, the kit itself, it's very self-explanatory, but you have this, and each bottle is numbered with a joint number on them. So you put them where the numbers are to make sure that everything is just in its place and you have everything organized and cleared out for you. And then there's the actual, called the membrane unit. Comes like this. Unwrap it, put it in the middle here of the tray, like this. Well, I'm not going to take it out, but it's just, I'm going to preserve it. But yeah, you'll put it in there, and then this is what you are going to prick yourself with, I believe, right? That's the, yeah, right, just making sure. I have not read all the instructions because I literally just opened them up in front of everyone here, which is exciting. It's like Christmas for me. I don't know why. It's exciting. The science is exciting. I mean, for someone who's been living with HIV since 2007, the science, what's exciting about this is how far we've come. Like before, you'd wait like a good 8 weeks before, 6 to 8 weeks before you got your results back, and then you have to do another test and so on, and to find out your resistance. It was stressful. It was stressful. I wish I was able to get my results that quickly back in the day. So the science has progressed immensely, and it's amazing to see. So if you have any questions about anything that I showed you, all the information that you need is at GetaKit.ca. So go there, discover the website and everything. So it is time for questions. Adrian?
How many languages are the kits available in?
Alex?
Waiting for, yeah, sorry, I'm waiting for Patrick to jump in. I never want to interrupt.
French and English.
Yeah. With like we've been talking to other sites with earmarks for other languages as well. I think Spanish is the next big one.
Yeah. LJ is asking, when do you hope this will be available for people not in Ottawa? Because I know that also there was someone else that's on the call that just tried to find out if they're eligible. It said that it's only available for Ottawa. If you live in Ottawa. So how is that going to work?
Alex, that's you.
I know. So we are hopefully going to be launching at a site in Toronto imminently. And as we said, we're in early conversations with other sites as well. We're in conversations with Adrian and Carol right now about getting it to your region, in this region, this region. We're all together on Zoom, and so that's really going to come at the pace of how quickly we can collect materials, ensure that staffing is in place, and everyone feels comfortable with how to use the website and other pieces. So it shouldn't be too long, but it's also hard to tell just because it just depends on the speed at which we can gather all the components for launch. But the Toronto site should be coming up really soon, and they actually we cut our teeth with that site trying to come up with all the user guides and post-test counseling guides and stuff too. So we feel like every new one that comes up will be a little bit faster.
Thank you, Alex. I just wanted to mention to everyone, some of the barriers were mentioned earlier. So if someone doesn't have a cell phone or even an email address or anything like that. So those are things that ACDR in partnership with OHTN, we're working closely together to see how we could overcome those barriers and how we can make it more accessible to people who really need the self-testing kits. Because we understand that some of us who are working in with ASOs or other organization community partners, that we work with people that are homeless, that don't necessarily even have ID or so on. So we are working on all that. The other thing that we wanted to mention as part of ACDR, so if you don't want this, because if you don't live alone and you want this to be very confidential, you don't want this to be delivered to your home, we could have a conversation with us at ACDR and we could arrange for it to be delivered to the agency for you. So you could come and pick it up from us, which will be very helpful for a lot of folks. We understand that, especially for young adults who may still be living with parents or understanding with the pandemic right now, a lot of folks have to move back home. So, but it does, and the testing would be, the self-testing would be something that would be very beneficial. So we do understand that. So there's more questions here. I'm just gonna, all right, let's scroll up. Randy's asking, what do I need to do to get this available in Simcoe, Muskoka?
Email us. Start with an email. Email us first, I think, and then we can probably take it from there. I think actually it's just great to know who wants it, like who is interested in GetaKit, and we're always happy to talk about it. But start with an email. I stopped sharing the slides, but either Patrick or myself, and we can do next steps from there.
Patrick and Alex, do you mind sharing your email addresses in the chat for folks?
And when in doubt, you can contact Kiro as well.
Yes, exactly. And I could definitely get that going for you. And as I said, this workshop and the contact information and everything, I'll put it up on the msmderm.com website. It's going to have a section called GetaKit. So all the information that we talked about today, including the workshop that is being recorded right now, will be on there in case you forget anything. All right, thank you for that. Next question is, so knowing that people in Thunder Bay access healthcare from Toronto quite frequently, what are the chances of people up here having access to the services there?
Sorry, that's so Ken, that's a good question, and that's the thing that we work on before going live at any new site. We want to figure out wherever you are testing, where are the care centers for you in our status neutral approach, meaning where, if we're going to be shipping to Thunder Bay, where are you going to be able to get PrEP? Where would you be able to go and get PEP? What are the sites where you could actually go for peer counseling, for support services? Where could you do confirmatory testing? And where can you go and actually get your HIV care? So instead of just saying, now you have a positive result, and we've thought no further than just informing you that you have your diagnosis, it's putting those pieces together, ensuring that they're actually in the box. And so, Kiro, what you have, there's the section that actually has the resources. There's a, oh, you folded it back up, but one of the sections actually.
I have OCD, sorry.
Can you open it to the one that actually has the resources?
Yeah. So you're talking the print part, the printed part on the box itself?
Exactly, yeah. So all of those right now are for auto, but what we'll have is the ability to overwrite those. So no matter where we're shipping them, there will be actual information that's local to where it's being shipped to. So it's sort of basically we need to fill in all that information, figure out what those sites are, that they're going to be operational, including during COVID, that they're open, that people can actually get support and services, tweaking the information sheets to make sure the phone numbers are valid, and so forth. So that's really I think that's the answer to your question is, once we move to a site, we make sure that we have all that information. We build it into the kit to make sure that it's local and supportive, and with resources that are open and available.
Thank you, Patrick. James asks, how is the kit package for mailing, playground wrapper, return address? So it's packaged like this. This is how you're going to get it in the mail. It does not say anywhere on it that it's got a kit or it's an HIV self-testing kit. It's absolutely just pleasant. Like it looks like you got a gift of some sort. One of those, I don't know, something from Amazon. I don't know, something. You got something for yourself.
HIV, the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
It looks like you got a new phone or something.
Yeah. So when the Toronto site is up and running, that's okay. How large is the package? Will it fit through the mail slot? It does fit through, like you mean the mail slot to a door, James? No, it's a little thick. Yeah. So for that, so it would be, so it is registered mail, by the way. It comes with a tracking code. So what that means is if it's being delivered to you, it will be at the nearest post office if they could not put it in your mailbox for some reason, or it did not fit through the door.
It's small enough to fit in a Canada Post box, and a post office box in an apartment or condo.
I have an email, they'll follow up tomorrow. All right, thank you, Randy. Can
I just?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Beth Whalen's on the call. I just want it to be interesting to let Beth know that we're talking with GetaKit about how to make the kits more accessible to our IDU populations, and talking about our mobile service that we're introducing this year, and maybe keeping a small supply of kits on site at ACDR, so that we can actually, when people come in for needle exchange, in the moment we can actually capture them and say, hey, look, this is an option for you. If you want to do it, you can do this here and now, and then we'll enter that data into the system for them and get them in, as long as they're eligible. Same questions, same thing, answered and asked. But a way to contact or to reach the population that slips through our fingers the most. Because 9 times out of 10, if we say come back or we'll mail this to you, it won't get anywhere. But if they can do it right here on the spot, that's a really great way. And then of course, as they come back for services, we can then link them to care.
We all know in the moment is much better if we can do it, Adrian. So you've got it. No, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
We would definitely be able to direct folks over to your office if that happens. So
yeah, we definitely want to do that, especially we're going to have the harm reduction vans as well, which would be great. I mean, this is something that we're still working on. I know that Alex and Stephen, when we spoke last, it's not happening right away or soon. So we're just going to make sure to start at least with what we have right now through the online process of registering, and then we'll move forward from there also. But we are working as quickly as we can to make it as accessible as possible, and to make sure that, like Adrian said, that we have several boxes on site, because we understand that that's going to make a huge difference. It's not impossible. It just, there's a lot of politics in place and procedures in place, and like Alex mentioned earlier, there's the user guide that was being in place as well. There's a lot of details involved into allowing this to happen, and we want to make sure that it's done right from the beginning, so we don't mess up anything. And yeah, so
absolutely understand, Carol. Just it's nice to know it's in process.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that
Yeah.
it's something to look forward to hopefully happening.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. So Michael here, so Jane said, is there data being gathered on ages? When they register online, do they mention their age in there, Alex and Patrick?
Yeah, so I actually have the database open. So the average age is 31.5. I don't know the spreads on it because I was just quickly pulling it out, but the average age is 31.5.
I have a question actually. In terms that we said that if they are on PrEP, that they are not eligible, I will challenge that simply because within the MSM population, we work with a lot of folks that party and play using substances to enhance their sexual experience. And what that means sometimes is that adherence to PrEP may not be as adherent as it's supposed to be and so on, or they will take it as PrEP on demand. And if they partied for a while, the immune system goes down during a certain period of time. So why is it that it's limited to, you know, people on PrEP cannot be eligible for the GetaKit?
A lot of that is the window period. So what you have from, I'm going to see if I have this open actually. And if I do, I am answering this. There we go. I did find it. Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen if I have the ability to do this. All right.
Should be able to, yeah.
This is going to be a bit more complicated than we want, but it's the actual answer to your question. So there's two different types of tests that we have in Ontario. There's this 3rd generation, which you can see here, and then there's the 4th generation. This is just like your cell phone. They have the Samsung S21, the Apple iPhone 12, right? It's the next one. So they basically just move through the generations. The 4th generation is what Public Health Ontario Lab does, and that is the antigen antibody combination test. The self-tests and the point-of-care tests are 3rd. They're actually antibody only, so they're a slightly delayed technology. What it comes down to is the window periods and how quickly they can detect. So if you actually take the 4th generation and you move down to 36, somewhere around here, basically what it means is it's going to miss 0.05% of infections, right? So what you're getting is an exceptionally accurate blood test by 6 weeks. You're seeing the point of care is about the same, but we're saying the window periods, right? You basically, once you get up here, this would be 6 weeks here, I think. You're down to such an infinitesimally small number that you don't actually get down to until much later. So what this comes down to is the window period. If you go in for blood testing, I'd be more apt to say, let's do more frequent testing, because our window period, we know by 17 days, look, we can detect half of the infections, right? We can detect half by the time you're sitting at 2 to 3 weeks, but that's with the blood test, not necessarily with the point of care. So what you're going to end up doing is a lot of testing and yielding a lot of negative results. And if the person has just gone through a period where they've been slamming a whole bunch of meth, right? They don't know if they took their meds. They feel like garbage. Is it because you're coming down off meth, or is it because you got syphilis, or is it because you have HIV seroconversion? The rapid test, so that the self-test may not actually detect it.
Okay.
Whereas at that point, it would be superior for someone to do the blood test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So it's not necessarily that I don't want people doing testing, and that's where the 363 comes in. But just as we're working through some of the new trajectory, I don't know, the pathway through the actual website, we're basically having triggers that will be built in for the eligibility criteria to explain why and what.
Yeah.
Plus saying, you answered this, you're not eligible. We think this is better for you, right? And here are the resources that we'll be able to populate as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And then for Adrian and Beth, just as a follow-up. So one of the things we're working on to really rapidly implement and sort of figure out some of the kinks in Ottawa Our curbside pickup, which is what you're talking about, being able to get at the site and actually having that on site. So a person could basically show up. I think we're going to test it first with some tablets that one of the local ASOs have. They'll put in the stuff, they'll select curbside, and then the peer worker will give them the kit right there on the spot. So we're working out that process, and we're going to be implementing it. We have sort of the user guide. We help them set up how to do the testing. One of the things, like, if you're not actually a self-testing site, or you don't have the actual ability to do testing and somebody's doing testing, what can the peer worker actually say to somebody before they get into actually administering a test, to make sure that you're staying within the parameters of what your institution can do by its insurance and sort of all of that. So it's how do we help you support saying like, well, like you can unpack, you'll see the stuff that's in there, but you can't be interpreting results. So we're working out those user guides. So as well, by the time we really get to it, we should have crash landed this a few times to make it work even better for you.
Thanks, Patrick. So here, Michael is asking, you said 14% are undiagnosed or unaware they are living with HIV. Is that in Ontario or Canada?
Both.
Both. Also, did you say they reduced the age from 18 to 16?
Yes.
That's awesome, by the way. Thank you. This is great news, actually, because Durham, within the MSM and our youth programs, there's a lot of youth here, a lot of newcomers that come here to study, and they're here by themselves and so on. So this is going to make such a huge difference. Excellent. Does anyone else on here have any feedback, questions, or anything that's on their mind that they want to share? If you do, just unmute yourself and feel free to speak.
That's really a key point, Kiro, that we have a large number of foreign students who've tested positive over the last little while because of lack of access to PrEP, because often the parents' insurance plans disclose what medications they're on. And so any other tool we could actually supply these young men with opportunities to test more often in a way that feels safe to them, I think is great. So I think this has got lots of really good benefits to multiple populations.
Thank you, Adrian. Anyone else? Does anyone else have any questions? If you so if you have any questions that you're too shy to ask on here, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop recording right now. So that could be a reason why you don't want to ask your question, which is totally understandable.
I have one more thing that we can put on your record. I think one of the reasons that we've been successful in getting, like when Alex and I started this, our goal was 150 to 400 people within the first 6 months, right? And we're at 444 in 7 months, right? So we exceeded it. We wanted around a 60% reporting rate for results. We're just under, but it's sitting around there. 71% among priority populations, a quarter who had never tested before. I think one of the reasons that we were successful in doing this is it's not a top-down project in that we go into any region or any group or any population and say, here's how you need to offer testing. It's more, we have this sort of resource that we've built, the online platform, the logistics to actually getting kids out, the sort of wraparound care processes that we figured out. But we work with people to say, you need to populate this. You need to tell us who it needs to go to. You need to tell us what the barriers are for your groups, for your region, for your geography, and so forth. And so I think one of the things that's nice is that it is flexible in that regard. I say this in every presentation, we have learned the hard way across Canada and Ontario that there's the one size fits all model to health policy is an abysmal failure. And I think we have tried really hard with this to say we need to tweak it to regional, to geographic, and to population-based needs. Meaning, if we do roll it out and something's not working, we want to know so that we can actually tweak it and change it on the fly.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick. That's wonderful. Anyone else? All right. So can I stop recording now, or did Alex, did you want to add anything else to the recording? Patrick?
No, I think that was summed it up perfectly.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to stop recording.